What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Politics with Paul podcast with me, Paul Rader, nonpartisan political analyst, researcher, writer, speaker, and author. Here to give you some ground rules, I suppose, for what to expect from this podcast and why I do what I do, what exactly it is I do, and how it came to be. So let's get right into it. So, like I said, I'm Paul Roden, and a little bit about my educational and professional background. I am focused on the educational side of political science, the civics behind it, why it works the way it does, how it works the way it does, and bringing that to people. And among my main goals are to bridge knowledge gaps, mend political divides, and make politics more accessible and fun. Educationally, I have a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of South Florida, go Bulls, and I have a master's degree in political science from the University of Florida Gators, in particular with the UF campaign, or excuse me, the UF program. It was a political campaigning specific program. So the educational, or the academic and the practical sides of politics were the focus for that. And so I've got a really well-rounded education in those regards. Some professional experience of mine. Currently, as of July 2024, I work for Safety Review, SAYFIE. That is a nonpartisan political news aggregator for Florida politics specifically. So Florida politicians, Florida public policy, anything that's related to Florida politics, we put up on that website. And I also used to work for Ballotpedia, the nonpartisan encyclopedia of American politics. Now, obviously, I don't speak for any of my current or former employers. I speak purely from my own work as a nonpartisan political analyst and researcher and speaker and author. And like I said, research and speaking are also another big part of what I do. Um, all sorts of research and aspects of politics that fascinate me, from election results, voter turnout, voter behavior, political institutions and why they work the way they do, political history, of course, all sorts of things like that. And another thing to highlight is that I wrote a book. I self published it, called Why Independents Rarely Win Elections and How They Could Become More Competitive. Sort of self explanatory, but just to give a little bit more background into that, it is a book about why independents struggle so much with elections, despite seemingly more and more people that identify as independents, uh, uh, more people identifying themselves as independents. If there's so many of those people, why do we not see more independent winners of elections? So it goes a lot into that, from voter psychology, how election systems are set up, like the primary system, all sorts of things like that. And it goes more into how all those things work in tandem to wreak havoc on independents' political fortunes, and some actionable ways that people can try to mitigate those obstacles. Now, the book is not trying to argue for or against having more independence. That's for whoever is reading that. They can decide if that's what they want. But that's the main gist of it, because I try to be as impartial in my work as possible. Now, I mean, there are some opinions sometimes that inevitably come into it, but I'll get more into that in a little bit in this video. But what drove me to this work, I'll give you the short answer for that, or a short answer for that. So I knew I wanted to do something in politics from about high school. I just knew that I really enjoyed politics and learning about it, not so much about the actual political campaigning and getting involved in politics. That's not my thing. But I knew I wanted to do something politically related. At the time, I didn't know if that was exactly what I would be doing, campaigning or anything like that. It wasn't until when I got to the University of South Florida, go Bulls again, I met a professor by the name of Dr. Susan McManus. Now, I had known about her before then. For anybody who doesn't know, she is a political analyst. She especially talks a lot on Florida politics, but she does national politics too, and she's on a lot of different TV and radio programs. And she's retired from teaching now, but she still does some analytical work. And she has been she continues to be a critical influence. She is the single biggest influence on what I do because of how she approaches politics from an impartial view and tries to let the data speak for itself as much as possible, not throwing in a lot of opinions, which people do. And just had a great admiration for her work and how she approached it. And for me specifically, she has been incredibly I would not be where I am today, and I would not be going anywhere where I'm going without her guidance and friendship. And she, in fact, safety reviewed, to go back to that, she vouched for me when I was applying for their open position for editing their front page. And she also wrote a recommendation letter for me for grad school, uh, vouched for me in all sorts of different ways. And she's just been a great mentor for me. She has been the best mentor for me in that regard. And I just have, like many people, I have been increasingly disenchanted with how politics has been going in this country and how it's just gotten more and more toxic, there's more and more dissension, there's a lot more animosity, and it's something that it's not a it's not sustainable in the long run. And I want to bring something different because we have a lot of people that just have their specific worldview and they stick to it. They don't try to see multiple sides of an issue. People think they've got things figured out. There's a lot of know-it-allism, I think, and that happens to all of us to some extent. If we didn't think that we were right about things, we wouldn't think the things that we do. But a lot of people don't step back and try to examine their opinions more. And I didn't want to be one of those people. And I think there's a lot that is missing in political discourse, political analysis. And I want to be able to make that better. But eventually I realized that the thing that I really enjoyed most about politics was I enjoyed knowing why things worked the way they did and how they came to be this way. And I wanted to be able to make those aspects better. So that is one of the guiding things about why I do what I do and ultimately what I do. And so there is everything I do is, or most of what I do is in service to making those things work better, or at least teaching people why things work the way they do, and then they could come to their own conclusions. I have my own opinions on how we can make politics work better, but at the same time, I also try to be as impartial as possible. So as I don't want to just ram down my own opinions for people. So there'll be a lot more coverage of multiple sides of debates in this podcast, which I'll get to that in a little bit as well. So why do I do what I do? I touched on a little bit of that already, but there is too much divisiveness and toxicity in today's political climate, and I feel like I can do something to help alleviate that with a nonpartisan approach to a lot of the issues we face today, or just in general, a nonpartisan approach to teaching people about politics, civics, election results, voter turnout, whatever the case may be. And I'm a big believer in impartiality. Sometimes I have to check myself, have to make sure that I'm not being one-sided on things as well. Now, now, something like I said before, sometimes opinions are going to come into play. I mean, inevitably it happens, but the opinions will never be favoring one party or group or ideology or person. And if I really do have an opinion that's, I try to, if I am actually critical of something, I try to be across the board critical. I won't single out people. But in any case, if I am going to be uh, putting forth an opinion, I try to make it as clear as possible that, hey, this is my opinion. And I will not include it if I don't absolutely have to. Like if I were to talk about certain debates, and I will have an episode about this, age limits in Congress. Now, I'm not going to tell you whether I think we should or shouldn't have those, but I will tell you what people who want age limits, that is the maximum age that people can serve in an elected office for. I will tell you why some people think we should, and I might try to speak from that lens just to uh, make it clear why people think we should have that. And I will also do the same thing for people who don't think we should have that age limit. And there's just a lot of biased analysis these days, anyways. A lot of people that call themselves fact checkers, and they're from a blatantly biased source. And I don't want to call myself a fact checker because I feel like that's kind of obnoxious, but I try to be as fact based as I possibly can be and try to help people interpret data much more clearly and effectively. And like I said before, one of my main goals is to bridge knowledge gaps within the public. So there's a lot of uh, knowledge gaps for people about various aspects of politics. It can sometimes be very unapproachable, inaccessible for people. People a lot of times don't know where they can get quality information, unbiased information. I hope to alleviate those issues to some extent. And there's just also a lot of poor or mediocre coverage of politics or cursory understanding of political nuances from a lot of talking heads. For example, if we talk about polling, there's a lot of misconceptions of polling and how to read them. And that's one of those kinds of things that I'm going to be talking about in this podcast. And then political discussion on TV is often just too dry, or like in a way that it could be just very rote about fact 1, 2, 3, and these are facts here, and not really necessarily bringing them all together or making them interesting, or they only get the really surface level aspects because that people who are analyzing this stuff think that that's all people are going to care about. And a lot of people don't really care about politics because they think it's boring. And obviously, I don't think it's boring. And I think there's a way to make it much more fun and approachable for people. So I don't want people to think that politics is boring and unengaging. And I'm going to hopefully make politics more fun and engaging for people so that we can have uh, a better state of civics in this country. Because I think the state of civics in this country is also, uh, it could be a lot better. And of course, like I said before, I just find the ins and outs of politics fascinating and want other people to see that as well. And that's one of the many things that this podcast is going to seek to do. So, speaking of which, what is this show about and what will it have? So, be covering a whole bunch of different aspects of political science, news, and policy in a nonpartisan fashion, as impartially as I possibly can, but we'll have some flavor to it just so it's not so dry and just reciting facts. Uh, there is some inevitability that some opinion will creep in, and like I said though, I will limit that as much as possible, and it won't favor party. It won't be Democrat or Republican or third party or independent. It won't be ideological. It won't be favoring a group or a person or a policy position. I'm just going to show you as fact-based as possible, but I don't know, might throw in a joke or two, but it doesn't necessarily mean I favor one position or another. Sure, I have my own opinions, but I keep them out of the way as much as I possibly can. And there will be some times where I have a guest and I will interview them on general or specific topics and the kinds of work that they're doing, but it will be, again, it will be focused on a nonpartisan fashion. If I do have more partisan people, I will have a way to balance it out. I might have a Republican and a Democrat on, or a conservative or a liberal, or conservative and a liberal, that sort of thing. Uh, and of course, since this is the only the very beginning of the podcast as of this recording, there's a lot of things that might change about how I approach things, but you can always count on the fact that it's going to be very nonpartisan how I approach things, non-ideological. And sometimes like I said, it will be a guest, and sometimes it will just be me. I might have multiple sides to a policy debate and what people believe about a policy, or whether for people who support a certain policy, like I mentioned before, age limits for Congress, what people who support that believe, and people who oppose that, what do they believe? There'll be an election analysis as well. Like for election results, obviously 2024, when 2024 happens, and how certain things work, like polling or little aspects of election coverage, like how do we come up to Republicans being red and Democrats being blue. All sorts of different topics are going to come up. But that is the general overview of this podcast, and I'm super excited to be doing it because, nobody else has a podcast. Why shouldn't I have one? Well, there might be a few reasons, so don't answer that question. But I'm excited to be able to do this, and I cannot wait to bring my own brand of nonpartisan analysis to the table. So I hope you'll join me and you'll get a lot out of it. And yeah, I think this would be great. Hopefully you think so too. So ended off with some show notes. I'll put on some of my links, like my book on Amazon, my LinkedIn and Facebook. My Facebook's name is Paul Rader, author and speaker. I also write on Medium, and if you don't know what Medium is, it's basically a blog website that you can write about really whatever you want. Obviously, in my case, I write about political science and nonpartisan and non-ideological lens. I will be starting a newsletter shortly, and so when I have that ready, that will also be in the show notes, and also my guest profile on Matchmaker FM, which is a website where you can get podcast guests, or you can ask somebody to be on their podcast. So I will have my stuff on there as well. And if anything else comes up, I will include those in the show notes as well. So anyways, thank you all for listening to this. And I am looking forward to doing what I can to help bridge knowledge gaps and mend the political divide, and I hope you will join me in that endeavor. So until next time, take care.